Puppies and kittens rolling in the grass. It's supposed to be upbeat and happy.
It's hard to do when you're talking about pet food. It really is.
Well, we're going to start off light.
Okay, that works.
We'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah.
I always get nervous when there's like interviews and stuff. Like I can interview someone, but for me to talk, I'm like, oh God.
Okay, well, no nerves here. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Natural Pet Care Summit. And this hour, we have two guests that I'm about to introduce, and our topic is Get Schooled, the truth about pet food. You all know, if you've been following me for a while, that this is one of my favorite topics. And these two people are two of my favorite people to engage about this topic. So we have Susan Fixton. In 1991, Susan Fixton made her first phone call to a pet food company, and there's probably been a million phone calls since then, after her veterinarian informed her that her beloved dog's bone cancer at the young age of 8 was probably caused by the chemical preservatives in her pet's food. And back in that day and age, Thoxaquin, BHA, BHT, widely used. And by the way, they're still widely used. They just don't tell you. The pet food company proudly told her that the shelf life of their food was 25 years, more than 3 times longer than her pet lived, which is amazing. And they will still proudly tell you that, by the way. Susan has, from that day forward, Susan has studied pet foods, pet food ingredients, and the regulations that govern them. And in 2006, she started truthaboutpetfood.com, one of my favorite sites. I share a lot of her blogs to share info she learns about pet food with others. And then along the way came a director named Cole Harrington. And he's the director and narrator of the American documentary Pet Food. If you have not seen Pet Food, I would strongly recommend watching Pet Food. You will never think about pet food the same way again. It explores the pet food industry with interviews from veterinarians and pet owners by discussing raw diets, recalls, and veterinarian recommendations around feeding your pet. I'm going to have Cole give the backstory on how he ended up doing that Pet Food documentary, because since then, this kind of seems like Cole's purpose in life. And what I think it was a little bit accidental that you actually did this. and since that time, this has been a huge focus for you. So how did you get started making pet food? Like what made you want to make that documentary?
A friend of mine had a dog with an itchy stomach. Her name was Kadri. The film's dedicated to her at the end. And he went to the vet like 3-4 times, prescribed this, prescribed that. Could never get rid of this rash on his dog's belly. So he goes to get her groomed in Hollywood one day, and this groomer's like, I see this every day. It's the shitty grains in the food. Get grain-free diet. And he's like, oh, what's a grain-free diet? So he starts the Google search, and that's where, grain-free is the best thing. Grain-free will murder you. Corn is great. Corn will, cause diabetes and cancer, possibly. So he was confused, and he came to me and was like, I was kind of out of school at that point. It was sort of like the tail end of school. I'd worked on a few films at Sony, and he's like, you're the one that loves documentaries and you're always editing. I think this would be a great documentary. I'm like, pet food? That sounds like the dumbest thing ever. And it was the dumbest thing ever, which, kind of ties into how it came across Susan in the beginning. We were just, trying to find information, and being in Los Angeles, we would go meet with people. So people would run blogs, or we'd come across an article, could we meet with you? And we would meet up with these people, and they were crazy. And it's like, oh my gosh, okay, so maybe the pet food industry, there's nothing wrong with it. And eventually I came across a guy who's in the film who had a pet food company in Orange County at the time. He goes, have you seen this AFCO book? I'm like, no, I've never heard of this AFCO book. What is it? And he's like, oh, these are the rules that people have to follow. And it was sort of like wink, wink, these are the rules. And then whenever I saw that book, I was like, oh, it's not crazy after all. Here it is, in black and white, all of the potential manipulation that can happen. So sort of took off from there, and, all of the research somehow brought up everyone located in Chicago. There was a Dr. Barbara Royal that I heard an audio file of. I didn't know what she looked like or what she did. We just showed up to interview with her, and it was like, wow, great. And then Dr. Becker, I knew little of. She had a Facebook page at the time. And all of these people that we met, there started to be a common aspect in everyone's research, which was, what should a dog or cat eat? What should they eat? Not, what are you going to force upon them? So it took off from there. And now I'm looking to be saved. So I'm hoping you can help me finish my next film and get me out of this.
Oh, you don't want to be in pet food for the rest of your life. Okay. So Susan has been going to AFCO meetings. How many years have you been going to AFCO, Susan?
I think it's like 10 years.
Okay. So yeah, you started Truth About Pet Food in 2006.
Yeah.
So you started that before you started going to AFCO.
Yeah. And it was a couple of years in, and pet owners sent me an email. A pet owner did, and said, the meeting was in St. Pete. I'm in Clearwater. The meeting was in St. Pete, and they said, you got to go. And, you don't, when you're doing advocacy work, you don't make a lot of money. And this was early on. This has been my sole job. I didn't have the money to go. And I admitted that, and pet owners donated money, got me in the door. It was crazy. I can remember asking FDA at that first meeting about the illegal ingredients. And I was nervous as all get out, shaking as I'm asking the question. I don't think they saw me shaking, but, I asked them right out of the gate, why do they allow illegal ingredients? And, to this day,
we're still waiting for that answer.
An answer to that question.
We're still waiting for that answer.
Yeah.
So for those of you who are new to our page, AFCO is the American Association of Feed Control Officials, and they're a private firm, right? They're not a government organization.
No. Yeah.
But FDA and all the state pet feed regulatory officials all are part of it and attend. And the meetings are, well, now they're up to probably 500 people in attendance. And if we're lucky on a really good meeting, we might have 10 to 12 consumer advocates. And
That's
Susan's
a good meeting.
Yeah, that would be a good meeting, because there are a
Normally
lot of
it's just you and Susan.
Yeah, well, and I've missed a few, unfortunately. But I was like Susan, my first AFCO meeting, I had not met Susan. We had texted and emailed. And so I walked into the room of 500 people. I didn't even know what Susan looked like. And I'm kind of, deer in the headlights, texted her, found out where, we were sitting. And I said, I'm going to sit on my hands. I'm going to take a lot of notes. I'm not going to say a word. I don't know anything that's going on here. These people are kind of scary. And after the opening remarks, I forget who did the opening statement that year, but he said something about, what did he call? Said we were all being anthropomorphic and assigning human characteristics to our pets. And everybody knew that pet feed was absolutely fine. And it was ridiculous to think that our pets should eat anything different. And they did just fine with the feed that they were promoting. And I saw fireworks. I mean, there was steam. My eyes... And they have microphones, and you're allowed to make comments. And so I couldn't get up that aisle fast enough, and they could see me shaking because I was standing in front of them with tears flowing. I was so angry. And I said, really? You think this food is okay? I'm a veterinarian. I'm the one who has these animals coming into my office that have horrible chronic inflammatory bowel disease, horrible skin disease, horrible ear infections that cannot be cured with these pets on these toxic feeds that you are regulating and promoting and not enforcing. So, that was the end of my, I'm going to sit on my hands and say nothing.
Could I ask again, who was it that said that? Was it like an FDA person or?
Do you remember who gave it was their opening speech.
We can look it up. They would, have the.
It was one of the big guys in charge. I probably have notes.
AFCO. I would bet it was AFCO versus FDA.
I think it was an AFCO person.
Yeah.
And I probably still have those notes running around somewhere because I was just livid. If I went back and look at my blogs, I could probably see who did it. But we had an interesting, similar experience. Cole, did you actually get kicked out of the room? If I remember, you actually got when you were really pushing them, and they
wanted to.
They wanted to.
No, just to piggyback off your comment there, I have been doing a lot of heavy research since March, and I've been able to extract like 50,000 emails pertaining to all the states talking about this AFCO thing, which AFCO really is just public employees. So they kind of, if you go to a state or the FDA, they're like, oh, we follow AFCO, and they don't admit the fact that they are AFCO. So they try to make it like, oh, we can't give you any of these feed definitions because they're copywritten by AFCO. And it's like, you are AFCO and you're a public employee, and we can get into that later. But the fascinating thing that really is crazy to me is what you mentioned with that person saying it's just fine. And what we know is that there is epidemics of obesity and cancer and a lot of other health issues. And so for government officials to stand up and say, that's fine, is not okay to me, which is, if you get down to it, why do I keep going, is because this really has nothing to do with pet food. It's everything to do with pet food, but it's really about government saying, you know what, it's fine if 50% of the people are dying of cancer, and they're not giving the proper information.
Yeah, well, our, the dog population right now, the cancer stats are for dogs that reach 10 years of age, 1.6 out of every 2 will develop cancer. Yeah. 1.6 out of 2 if they live to 10. Now, I can tell you that we don't have those stats in my house, and our dogs are living to be 18 and 19. And we don't have those stats, and my dogs are rescue dogs that were fed horrible diets and lived in puppy mills and had horrible beginnings, many of them. Some we've gotten privately, but many of them had horrible beginnings, and we were able to turn them around with real food, human grade food. So, so Cole, tell us about the next film, because I know you're working on another one now.
Yeah. Well, it's again by accident, kind of. I always joke with Susan, I'm like, you didn't tell me this is like a vortex. It like sucks you in and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm obsessed about this now. But again, really at the end of this, it's about democracy. And I grew up loving documentary films that, like Barbara Koppel's a documentary filmmaker. She made one back in the day called Harlan County, USA. And it was following people in real time as they tried to unionize the coal miner. That was like the basic topic. And, I love other films like that where you're following something happen in real time. And, as being younger, I was like, oh my God, I hope one day I can make one that follows people in real time. And luckily this next film, again, I had met companies after releasing the first film. I made the first film on $50,000, which really was wasted down 35, was 80 grand in debt, not to give too much information, had negative money for marketing. Luckily, Netflix picked it up and it got word of mouth for 2 years. But it's sort of like, why am I doing this? Where was my train of thought? You're gonna have to keep me.
The new movie.
Okay, yeah. So after the film, because I had no money to like market the movie, I was like trying to speak with every company, like, could we go into your plant? Could we show people how the foods are made? Yada, yada, yada. And I'd come across the company, someone had introduced me to, hey, you need to go talk to this company, Answers Pet Food. Okay, I think I remember them. And I actually met them originally. Like if you watch the first Pet Food and you go into the American Holistic Vet Conference and Hills is there, I actually met Jackie from Answers there for the first time, you know, and she's like, we don't formulate as per blah, 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 because it's toxic to the dogs. And she really scared me. I'm like, this woman is off the chain. But years later, her stuff always stayed in the back of my mind. And years later, when I came to meet them again, it was like this burgeoning new industry, this kind of raw pet food industry. And there's a few companies out there that really go above and beyond and show you these are our sources. You know, this is how we make our food. We're trying to be the opposite of what all of these, you know, conglomerates are. And when I met them, there were rumors in the industry, you know, the FDA is trying to make raw food illegal. I'm like, really? That's a rumor? They weren't saying that, but other people were. And then the other rumor was FDA can't make raw food illegal. So again, it was sort of like the first film was like corn good, corn bad, you know? Now it's like raw food would murder you or raw food will heal your pet. FDA's trying to shut it down, FDA can't. And Answers had a story that back in 2015, the FDA came after them. And then FDA was going around about every raw pet food company trying to get people to voluntarily recall. So we would see these voluntary recalls and be like, well, there must be something wrong with the food or something, right? So I'd spoken to Answers about this, and you know, we had did this Talk to Us campaign. It was part of that. And I was like, you know what, let's just cut out that part, you know, let's just cut out that FDA part. And this was about 2018. So they had the issue in 2015. It was 2018 whenever I was talking to them, or 2017. I'm like, you know what, if the FDA ever comes back to you for some reason, I have a gut feeling they're gonna come back. Would you let me document it? They're like, yeah, sure. And almost every other raw pet food company was like, nope, don't want anything to do with you, don't want to antagonize, leave us alone. And Answers.
Well, yeah,
like,
they're all afraid to antagonize them.
Yeah.
So luckily, I've been at the right place at the right time to be able to really document things happening in real time, which was my sort of dream movie to make. But then to take all of that and to make it make sense to the audience has been the most difficult thing, because it sounds like, why are these people screaming about raw pet food? Like, what is going on? But, you know, I'm sort of, I guess, 2/3 through the way of making that and almost being done. So hopefully we'll be done soon.
If we could get more companies to acknowledge trying to choose my words properly here, the manipulation that regulatory authorities put them through, trying to manipulate them to get the recall. If that could be opened up, if all those companies would just be transparent, and they're afraid to, because ultimately these regulatory authorities have a big lock and a chain that they could put on their front door, you know, and it's
So
very
Susan,
frightening.
let's help the people watching understand what a voluntary recall is. And has there ever been
This is the voluntary recall. What are you calling?
so
Okay.
So I mean, has there ever been a forced recall of raw pet food, or is it all voluntary? And
All voluntary.
so there's just a lot of threats, but the FDA has never actually said, if you don't recall it, we're fining you or shutting you down.
Cole might have emails where they have said that, basically, but you know, they do. There's a protocol that regulatory authorities are required by law to follow. Chain of custody documents, transportation, so they sample a pet food in a pet food store. If it's a raw frozen product, if it's a cooked frozen product, it is required to arrive at the lab frozen, and it's supposed to be documented what temperature it arrives at. One example is with Radcat Pet Food, who went out of business because they did voluntary recalls. they, Colorado Department of Agriculture admitted that they transported this frozen product to the lab on the seat of the car in July. They had a cooler in their car, but they just didn't use it. And they're required, regulatory is required to give each company a split sample of, they call you up and go, your product tested positive, you got a recall. And the company has the right to go, okay, send me a split sample and the chain of custody documents before they recall. And multiple states just go, no, we're not going to do it. And then the state reports it to FDA. And so you not only have the state screaming at you to recall or else, you have FDA going recall or else. And just how you felt at that first AFCO meeting, I felt, probably Cole, you felt, it's intimidating to stand up to them. It's tough to stand up to them, but what's your option? You have to, in my perspective. So I wish more, Cole, would have at least talk to you. If they don't let you document it out, I wish so much, or talk to me, or Judy talk to you. These stories, the actual stories, need to come out.
And luckily three companies have gone on camera, and I've been able to get some government employees to go on camera. But the important thing to understand here, to piggyback off what you're saying, is that, and this plays into the DCM issue that came out with the FDA as well, right?
Oh, we can talk about that too.
Ready? Here we go. So raw pet food, why are people voluntarily recalling their foods, right? Well, I don't want to put anyone down, but what I do want to emphasize is it's very difficult for people, unless you really believe in what you're doing and you knew that from the start, it's difficult to stand up against a federal agency getting ready to railroad you over for when you've never broken the law or done anything wrong. But if you just sit there and let them railroad you over as a company, what I'm seeing is, well, the FDA is getting away with, being able to get away with doing things illegally. And I'm experiencing that myself as the filmmaker in the Freedom of Information Act, where the FDA is like, you can't have this record and you're filing too many. And they just make stuff up in order to just fit their agenda. And it's very bizarre and it's sad. But
is there a limit on FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act requests?
Nope, law doesn't state it. And, again, it's like they can move at 1,000 miles an hour and have 100 employees and 30 voluntarily recalls. But if you try to get those 30 testing things, they'll freak out, like too many, which is kind of, I've been able to find out that they've got 2 people processing their FOIA requests for the entire country of 350 million at the Center for Veterinary Medicine. But the important thing to understand with the raw pet food category is that the FDA came up with a compliance policy. And so whenever I started documenting this film and I'm speaking to these Answers Pet Food people, the first kind of step I try to take is, okay, Answers, give me all of your arguments. What are you having a problem with? What is there? And then I try to go through every one of those arguments and dispel them, because the last thing you want to do is put out a film where someone's giving an opinion and it's wrong. So I went through all of their arguments and validated them. And it took time, but it was easy to validate, because you then go to the FDA and you say, hey, this compliance policy, you're stating it's a regulation. Give me the information of how it's an actual regulation. No, it's just our opinion. So the FDA is regulating and has been regulating on their opinion, but they've put into public media releases that companies have broken federal law. And that's where things start to get very crazy. People often look at Susan and I like, you were crazy. And it's like, no, the crazy thing is the FDA is knowingly lying in media releases that companies are breaking federal law, when FDA, their job is to say, you know what, we think raw food in this manner is a risk to human health. We have the science for it. We're going to put it through proper rulemaking, and they have to put these issues through rulemaking in accordance to the Administrative Procedures Act. You've got to do public commenting, scientific reviews. They didn't do any of that. They just stated they had an opinion. Well, FDA, as you two both know, sits right next to the Pet Food Institute, and there's a lot of evidence showing that Pet Food Institute is very involved in running AVCO.
And they're a lobbying group, correct?
They're a lobbying group that represents all of these major conglomerate corporations. So what's the biggest threat to major conglomerate dry pet food companies? Well, you got the fresh food market growing, specifically the raw food market has gone up in the past few years. Then when I was finishing the first film, it was the grain-free sector. Well, what's happened with the FDA over the years? Well, they've come out with a compliance policy targeting raw, and they've come out with this DCM announcement targeting grain-free. So now you've got consumers scared of and reacting to misinformation where, there may, all people see is headlines, DCM, heart disease, raw food, salmonella, murder. And then people are running back to the processed foods. And you've got the federal government, the FDA, potentially acting on behalf of major conglomerate interests there through two different ways, but the goal is very similar. They've only went after the two competing sectors of the big dry food companies and completely ignored what we know is 50%, cancer rate, 50% obesity epidemic. So
and
that's why they hate us.
While they go after raw, okay, and have their compliance policy, on the flip side of that, FDA has another compliance policy that allows any pet food to utilize diseased animals and animals that have died other than by slaughter. And on the validation thing, FDA claims they're a science-based organization. So I sent a FOIA request to FDA asking them for the science that shows pets consuming ingredients sourced from diseased animals or animals that have died other than by slaughter are safe. And lo and behold, FDA didn't have any science to prove that. So,
but they're also okay with the speech that was given by the Rendering Association to open one of the more recent AFCO meetings, where they basically said it is just about impossible to have rendered products that do not have any pentobarbital euthanasia solution in them. And we're not going to enforce if you have euthanasia solution in your food.
yeah, just don't get caught. Just don't get caught.
Well, some were caught and still were not told to do a recall.
Yeah.
Susan, you found documentation where Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture found euthanasia. Was it pentobarbital?
It was pentobarbital in the fat that went to Champion Pet Food, and Champion admitted in the FOIA request, admitted to Pennsylvania Department of Ag that some of the product went to store shelves, consumer level. They did not ask them to recall.
No public announcement by the Pennsylvania Department of Ag.
No.
I would like to, if I may, reenact. I went to one AVCO meeting and I felt, and I wanted to ask you to, in the future, if you would still go back and why. And I understand the importance of it. I personally feel like I'm giving money to a mob in my,
I do too.
But I want to reenact the rendering guy. So when I first went there, I didn't know it's in a big ballroom. I'm assuming it's always like that. And they've got like a Supreme Court panel thing where Pet Food Institute, the lobbying group, is next to the FDA and mysteriously next to the same departments of ag that are always trying to enforce these voluntary recalls. And then you've got the Rendering Association up there. They kicked off the fresh food representative. So the rendering person, literally, as they're talking about things, is like this. At my meeting, sleeping the entire time. And I'm like, my only thought I had at my first AFCO meeting was like, oh my God, these are the people that are in charge of regulating like food and feed. It was sad. It's like, wow, I would not take advice from any of these people about what to eat at all.
No, and if you ask them what they feed their pets, they go, well, we have the inside scoop, so we can't say.
Yeah, yeah. Literally, FDA said that.
They did.
Yeah.
We asked them. There was a meeting where I thought Susan's head was going to explode. In the last 5 minutes of the meeting, she had a conversation outside of the meeting, prior to the meeting, saying, look, we would like to see, because pet feed is regulated through AFCO, just like livestock feed. It's considered feed. And Susan requested that maybe we have two definitions. One that is pet feed, that's the one that's made with these rendered ingredients and these illegal ingredients and, you know, not the best stuff. And then we have pet food. And pet food might be that food that has like real ingredients, like human grade ingredients and like good stuff that maybe you'd really want to eat, sort of like human food. And so under the table, behind the scenes, they were like, oh, yeah, we could get that through. And I forget, there was some bargaining chip that Susan had to get this whole thing done. They agreed to it. They put it off until the last 2 minutes of the last day of the meeting. And when Susan asked about it, they went, what?
Yeah.
We don't know what you're talking about. We never said that.
I mean,
we would never do that.
It was witnessed. Dr. Karen Becker, myself, an attorney, and a pet owner was on the phone. So there were 4 of us that all heard FDA say, yes, we can talk about that. We'll introduce it at AFCO. That's a good idea. It will be transparent for the consumer. I kick myself to this day for not recording, not pushing record on my. I kick myself, but they said it. We have witnesses that they said it. Then she turned around, the FDA representative, Charlotte Conway, turned around and said the opposite there. And I said, no, you agreed to this when we went to DC. And she went, no, we didn't. She lied. Yes, my head about exploded. I had to get out of that room because tables were going to start to be filled. I was so furious.
They all know the truth. I don't. Why is Charlotte Conway going to? Why are these FDA officials? It's sort of like, oh, we have to regulate, and they have to be regulated. So let's just get along and be in it together, per se, and then our lives will be made easier. Is that what they're trying to do? Because I'm very confused at why they would. With me and simple things, they go to links to just lie, and it's like there's no purpose of lying. It's weird.
Yeah, I don't know. I
think it's our government in general.
That's the hard thing. You what, Judy?
I said I think it's our government in general. I feel like we could be having a political discussion and we'd be saying the exact same things.
Well, not even that, but I mean, these are in theory very basic things. Just sort of topic. My thing is like, since AFCO technically is interstate commerce federal regulation, why is the FDA not holding public meetings and all of this being done through proper regulation? They always make the claim we are the most regulated industry and we're super transparent, and it's technically the opposite, where none of this AFCO stuff is technically regulations per se. They all do it privately and then try to adopt it through a back door through adoption by reference, versus letting it all be out there for everyone to see.
There's zero transparency, and AFCO itself has no regulatory authority. All they do is write the rule book, and then it's up to FDA and state officials to actually regulate things, which some do, some don't. Some are more transparent, some are better, some are worse. Cole, you have sued FDA. What have you sued them for?
In making the next film, I invited the FDA to come sit on camera and explain, just tell me, what's the compliance policy? Why is the compliance policy? Why didn't you get this passed as a regulation? So they would, I was hoping they would just come on and be like, yeah, we didn't do it through this way. We went compliance policy because X, Y, and Z. Well, they wouldn't speak. Okay. And then they were like, we'll answer any question, you want, here's our media department. Well, eventually I started getting into some questions where they'd provide an answer, but it didn't answer the question, It's like, why did you do this? Well, the sky is blue over there. And it's like, I didn't ask that. And so they eventually was like, we have no more resources for you. We are not going to answer any further question for you. You can file a FOIA request. Okay, so I'd never heard of FOIA. So I started filing FOIA requests. Next thing you know, I would file a FOIA request for emails and all of this stuff in the emails. I'm like, oh my gosh, you can gain access to people's emails and see all this crap they're writing about Susan behind her back. Okay, give me all of your emails with the keyword Susan Fixton. And I mean, in the emails of FDA, they were just railing me. He's an idiot and so stupid, and he can't he makes a film and can't even understand what a compliance policy is. It's like, well, you never speak about it, so it makes it a little bit more difficult when you don't know anything. Anyways, I started filing FOIA requests, and they eventually just administratively closed almost every one of my FOIA requests. So FOIA, you're supposed to submit it. It goes into a queue, and it's answered on a first in, first out basis. Now, I can understand, being the devil's advocate, if I put in a lot of FOIA requests, that they can try to work out a different way of processing my request. What they did, though, was basically you say, yeah, we'll answer these, but it's going to take 2 years, and I'm needing a lot, right? So when they administratively closed almost every one of my FOIA requests, it took quite a while, but I asked 10 lawyers, could you help me with this? Could you help me with this? And I finally found a good law firm that was like, yeah, the FDA is breaking the law. And we filed suit in March, and it's for simple things. Give us the testing records on this. There's a video of an FDA guy cussing at me and kicking a door into me and getting in my face.
Was that at Answers?
That was on their property, and FDA had a camera there and a military guy in my face. And they won't give up that video. They're like, it's part of an ongoing investigation, but I'm trying to get email records, testing records, video records, but really moving forward in the work I'm doing, transferring into pet school a little bit, is trying to extract as much information on AAFCO as possible. Because if we can get the FDA information on AAFCO, what I'm finding is all of this scientific stuff is very questionable science. And a lot of it's been scientifically validated like 30 something years ago. We're in a different world now. So I really think that as, through the work I'm doing now, a few other people have started to just independently get involved on their own goodwill and started doing FOIA requests as well. And so I think a lot more information on AAFCO is going to come out, and the question is going to keep getting bigger, which is, why is the FDA not holding public meetings that we can all be involved in? And why are state and federal agencies all doing this work at AAFCO? Susan, you've been arguing this for I don't know how long, but I've taken inspiration from your beef. And one of my FDA lawsuits and a state lawsuit is concerning, hi, could I see your regulations in your state concerning pet food ingredients? And they say, no, it's copywritten. And you can't copyright law. And why are state and federal agencies going to such a link to withhold ingredient definitions? It's the most bizarre thing. And we're transparent, but you can't see anything. So
right.
I filed a suit to get access to those because they want to say go buy them.
Right. So we can pay $200 to get the ingredient definition book, which is about this thick and nobody's ever going to read it. And it's written in such a way that you can't understand 3/4 of it anyway. And they just don't want pet food consumers to know what those ingredients really are, is what it boils down to. They don't want the consumer to pick up a bag of dog food or cat food and read the ingredients and go, oh, meat and bone meal. That sounds good to me. Meat byproducts. Sounds good to me. Except it's nothing you would ever want to eat or feed to your pets. But you don't know that as a consumer. And so there is no transparency. Things that we've asked them in the past, things like, well, okay, we've got this really low quality dry kibble. And on the picture on the front of the bag, It's raining down fresh carrots and peas and steak, and it just looks so, of course I would want my pet to eat that. And when you read the ingredients, you go, well, there might be one carrot in that bag. There's probably quite a few peas, but there's more corn and byproducts and rendered meals and things that I would not want my pet to eat. How do they get away with that on the label? They're supposed to have truth on the label. Well, the answer is, well, they have a picture of the dry kibble in the bowl, so that's their truth. And really what FDA cares more about is the font and the size of the lettering. That's their biggest concern.
It is.
Recently with the hurricanes, they've been sending out alerts like, hey, hurricane, number 5 is coming. As a reminder, if you're a farmer and you have issues with your products getting ruined by the hurricane, it can be recycled back into pet food. And my concern here is, at what point is this becoming fraud where you're taking waste, putting it in a bag with a human ingredient? It's not a human ingredient that's inside, it's waste, and it's feed ingredient. And then, as Susan's been arguing for a decade or more, and they're allowing this stuff to be marketed to consumers as if it's a steak. And
there's no steak in there. And there's the majority of the corn in this country is infested with molds, aflatoxins, and that is a huge problem. We see elevated liver enzymes in dogs all the time, and we need to look at what they're eating, because mold toxins in grains are highly toxic to the liver. But nobody ever questions that. And instead, what happens is they get a prescription liver diet that, now they're assigned to buying a $90 bag of crap to try to treat a problem. And the last AFCO meeting was where they started talking about prescription pet foods, and that's I kind of lost my sauce on that one too. The interesting thing is, when I came back to my seat, whoever was sitting next to me in our little row said, hey, those ladies behind us were making fun of you and laughing at you the whole time you were talking about prescription food. By the way, they represent one of those big prescription pet food companies. Like I don't know what I'm talking about. Only been a veterinarian for 36 years. No clue what I'm talking about. So yeah,
we're treated like, those.
I've got one on the prescription in a second.
Here again at the meetings, we used to go to the dinner. They have a dinner for the whole group, and we used to go to the dinner on the last night, and we quit because nobody talks to us. And not even, you can disagree with my opinion, but I'm still a human. But they don't look at it that way. We were never treated that way. So we just quit doing that. And our group, however many it is each time, we go to dinner ourselves, because even though we might have disagreements on a different perspective within our group, we're still all on the same page in transparency and quality of ingredients and legal pet foods. Let's run this whole show per law. Wouldn't that be interesting?
And they want to make you out to be like, oh my God, she's so disrespectful. And, I've seen Susan in action at AFCO, and she gets up and she speaks calmly, and, Dr. Judy, you as well. And there's questioning and challenging. Now, the whole reason why they run it as a private association is that they don't want questions. They don't want anything to, be I don't know, just sort of like a little annoyance in their ear or anything. They just want to do what they want to do with no question. And that's just not the way our country works. It's not the way democracy works, but they're trying.
So what did you have about prescription diets, Cole?
So as I was beginning this next film, it started off as sort of being a sequel to the first, and it sort of like veered off. But before it veered off, I was at the Global Health Expo, or Global Pet Food Expo in Orlando.
Remember
this, Susan?
Yeah.
And I was there with the intention of just filming a few fresh food companies to show that they're growing on the market, and they're kind of becoming big and competitors. So this whole raw food thing's not whack, people are really responding. and I forgot the releases. So I went back to the media department in order to print out some releases for people to sign. And I'm like, well, should I go down this way? Oh God, I'll have to see Purina. So I'm gonna go out the back way. So I went out the back way, and luckily, because I did, there was all of these ballrooms in the convention center, and one was Hill Science Diet Dispelling Pet Food Myths. All of this is documented. I don't go in with a camera, and I'm not rude to that degree, but I went in, they were ending their meeting. So it was like a Hills veterinarian presenting stuff that somehow people believed. I'm just like, how can people literally not critically think about some of the stuff they're saying? So I sit in the back, and at the end, you know, I put up my little foam here because I know that they're a little bit questionable. So I'm like, I know they're gonna make up a lie about me. And at the end, the veterinarian says, does anyone have any questions? And I'm like, yes. She's like, yes. And I'm like, why does your cat foods have so many carbohydrates when cats are obligate carnivores? And she goes, true, cats are obligate carnivores, but they can process the grains fine. And I go, but they're not biologically appropriate for the cat. She's like, true, they're not biologically appropriate, but they can still process them fine. And I go, well, then why don't you take the carbohydrates out? So up to this point, I've got the Hill Science Diet veterinarian saying not biologically appropriate, not required, but they can process them fine. Why don't you put that on the bag? And I go, well, why don't you pull the carbohydrates out? And she goes, well, you can't formulate a diet from protein alone. And I'm like, well, I didn't ask that. And I go, well, if you pull the carbs out, she goes, you would then need to add in fat. Well, what is a fresh raw food diet? You know, in theory, it is
meat and fat.
It is energy from fat, not from carbohydrates. And 2 hours later, they came after me and they threatened to arrest me. It was the most bizarre thing. It's all on camera. And they were like, you threatened a woman, and they made up crap. And I'm like, you might want to like restate your accusation there. But we have on camera the prescription Hill Science Diet people admitting, you know, basically what we know to be true. You know, this stuff isn't technically species appropriate per se, but they can process it anyway. You know?
They can process it. They can become obese. They can become diabetic. They can have urinary tract obstructions. They can have food allergies. But yeah, it's.
But we
it's
got
fine.
a food for that too.
Yes, exactly.
Susan, what is for both of you? What has been like the craziest moments, you know, in this whole like AFCO thing throughout the years?
No doubt was 2015 in Denver. Judy, you were there. Dr. Kathy Alanovi stood up. The discussion was on expired grocery store foods. And the example given was expired yogurt cups in the little 6-pack. In the back of groceries are big dumpsters that unknowing people think are going to a landfill where they put expired food. They're not. They're going to a renderer. Plastic and all is ground up and put in livestock feed animals. So this whole discussion's going on and everybody's, you know, accepting it fine. And Kathy goes up to the microphone and goes, wait a minute. I don't want my daughter to be drinking milk with phthalates, which is an element of plastic with phthalates in it. The entire room, and you know this big ballroom,
500 people.
booed her loud. I still kick myself for not standing up and going, you know, what are you all doing? No one of AFCO went quiet or hammered a gavel or anything. They let them do it. It was the most horrifying thing. And the second, Cole, is how they treated you.
Yeah, oh, that was a good one.
The guy from Minnesota, I can't think, Doug Luters from Minnesota treated.
Okay, I was wondering, who was that guy again?
See, I don't know all these people, but Susan does. Yeah, he was rude. So you know what my biggest aha with AFCO? The one I believe was San Diego, where we actually couldn't go to the meeting because they invited the gun-toting, threatening
Psychopath.
psychopath who threatened to kill all of us
Yeah.
because we spoke out against a pet food company that killed clients' pets with euthanasia solution in their food, while their website proudly stated that their ingredients in their food were human grade, USDA stamped, blah, 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 when in reality, their food was coming from the roadkill guy and the dead animal guy, and it had euthanasia solution in it in levels high enough to actually kill a dog.
Yeah.
And so this man was on their calendar for many years with his dog. He was a psychopath, and he threatened to kill any of us if we showed up at that meeting. And AFCO invited him, gave him a trip to the meeting. They've never invited any of us.
They would have given bullets had we shown up.
So, the bad thing was I had already paid
And
to go.
but no, the crazy thing is there's court documents proving that he's murdered someone before, and he's like, oh, I was raped, so that's why I murdered these people. Like, he has legitimately murdered people. It's not some like, oh, he's legitimately
he's a legitimate mentally deranged person, and they invited him to the meeting. So I paid for my airfare for my husband and I. We paid for a hotel for the week and couldn't even go to the meeting. And so my husband said, well, you can go to the meeting. I'm going with you. I said, are you bulletproof? Because I don't think so. So
that's kind of cool. I'll protect you, baby.
I'll protect you, honey. The bullet will go through me first. We'll both be dead. It'll be awesome.
So in the AFCO meeting, a gun would go off, and then the security guards would shoot us first.
Well, yeah. They'd be definitely after us. So, I appreciate my husband wanting to protect me, but he's not bulletproof, so we didn't go to the meeting. But we had a great time in California.
And then you two were also kicked out of not the virtual one, but the previous one. And they make up a whack excuse. We're not banning anybody. Yeah, you did. You did not allow someone to go to your meeting.
Yeah.
Well, I got an email that banned me from signing up and told me I was not allowed to attend. I'm pretty sure I was banned.
You were. Yeah.
And
because we were part of the Answers lawsuit is what they claimed.
that's what they claim. I'm like, I don't work for them.
Yeah, they knew full well that we were not affiliated with that lawsuit. They knew full well.
And now we have proof. We have the FOIA email now, Susan, where they literally just found a photo and banned everyone in the photo. So they banned everyone in a photo, but then stated something completely false.
That they banned everybody that was in my Facebook Live.
That's what
We
it was.
did.
Yeah. That is what it was. Yeah.
We did a Facebook Live calling them out, and they didn't like it.
Yeah.
Now, if they were so transparent and cared about health, all of this would be public. They wouldn't be doing it privately. They're going to have to be forced by a federal court, FDA, in order to do things publicly so we can all see. But it would affect so many industries if if the FDA wouldn't allow for such illegalities in the food, allegedly. So, if AFCO didn't exist and everything had to be properly passed, how many of these ingredients would really pass the muster to, be in?
Well, again, no federal law. There is never going to be a law on the books that says a pet food ingredient can be sourced from diseased animals or animals that have died other than by slaughter. That's why they have to get the definition that allows it. It has to be crafted correctly by AFCO, this unaccountable third entity over here, AFCO, and FDA allows it through a policy, because no law is going to allow that. Federal law actually says that in any food, human or animal, is illegal right now. So
Yeah, the law's there. There's just no enforcement.
Smoke and mirrors. It is all smoke and mirrors to keep people out so that not very many people know what's really going on, to give off the air that everything's good. This is a highly regulated industry. We know you love your pet and we're watching out for it. It's all smoke and mirrors.
I think the good news is that there's potential that whenever you have an organization, they say it's a private nonprofit, but private nonprofits that are run by public employees, depends on the state, could be forced to be recognized as a public body subject to the Freedom of Information Act. So it'll be interesting what the future holds, or to see what the future holds in that regard, because that's the last thing they want. And that's my biggest concern and question is sort of like, why is the last thing these public officials want is for this information to be so publicly available,
So
they have to do work.
yeah. So we're coming close to the end of the time, and you don't have to give me. So I see there was a cat in Susan's lap a while ago, and there's either a cat or a dog walking around behind Cole.
It's Bullet.
So you don't have to give me brands if you don't want to, but what type of food, now that you are so well versed in the pet food industry. Cole, did you have pets before you did this documentary?
This is my sister's pet, so okay. I actually still don't have one.
Okay. Which is fine.
Wish I did.
So now that your sister has all this information from you, because I'm sure you're not quiet about it with your family or anyone else, has she changed how she fed her cat, or was she always feeding her cat something good?
So my sister's little doggy.
Oh, dog, sorry.
I can't remember this. It's been so long. I think the dog was sort of born as I was coming towards the end of the first film or close. So they feed a fresher diet, but it's not raw or anything. They tried and they were just like, oh, I can't do that. But I'm about to force them to go onto an actual raw food diet, because now they're not doing the dry food, but they're not doing like the full,
Hey, but they're not doing dry kibble, so that's awesome.
But
so
I do have family members that do, and I'm like, has my life been in vain?
Yeah. Well, you can only lead the horse to water. So Susan, do you make your dog's food, dogs, cats? I think you have both.
Yeah, so I feed part home prepared cooked and part commercial raw.
That's kind of where we are.
Yeah. I mean,
although I do some home prepared raw too.
If I had a dog myself, I would, try to make as much yourself, or,
it's a lot less
feed what you can. Yeah. People always price some of the raw foods like, huh? I can't, but.
Well, I say this to clients all the time who, they'll contact me for a consultation, and we find the perfect diet for their pet, and they do it for a month, and then they go, oh my God, that just cost me a fortune. I'm like, well, is he better? Did you have any vet bills this month? Has the diarrhea cleared up? Is he not vomiting anymore? Have his allergies gone away? Wow. I think that's a pretty good price. Where do you want to spend your money? Do you want to spend it on the food, or do you want to spend it in the veterinarian's office getting drugs that are going to make your pet sicker in the long run? But the other thing is, if someone else is making your food for you or your food for your pet, it is always going to be more expensive. It's sort of like eating out at a restaurant. I have a relative who eats out for every single meal. She's never cooked a thing in her life. I can't imagine. First of all, she's eating all fast food, so you can imagine there's a lot of health problems involved. But, if you want to keep the cost down, make it yourself. It's kind of like making your own food yourself and not going to the restaurant, the gourmet restaurant, to get the gourmet food. You can make gourmet food at home, and you can educate yourselves how to do that. There are so many groups out there now through social media. There's so many. Susan has a pet cookbook. I've got pet cookbooks for raw or for cooked. There are supplements out there for balancing the diets. It's so much easier to do than it used to be. And there are, for those who don't know how to cook, don't want to cook, for those of you storing your purses and your shoes in your ovens and don't know how to turn the oven on, that's fine. You can buy food already made. And thanks to people like Susan and Cole, we hopefully will get more transparency. Susan's been at it for a very long time. And unfortunately, the wheels of government and AFCO, which technically is not government, but they sure act like it, they turn ever.
They are government.
So slowly.
Sorry, I'm personally like, when people are like, AFCO is not a regulatory body. Well, it technically is, because they're making ingredients that are then adopted into law. So, I mean, I'm going to I'm gonna
Yeah.
keep griping about that.
Yeah,
'cause they
I agree with you.
technically are. Yeah.
Right. I think they are too. So, the wheels turn very, very slowly. If somebody proposes a new ingredient, it takes about 3 years for that ingredient to actually get into the book.
And you can't get any of the information on how it's proposed. I've tried. Again, gonna have to sue the FDA again, but but Susan, you said this a few weeks ago or a month ago or whenever we last spoke. The house is starting to get wobbly a little bit.
The house of cards may come down eventually.
Because there's more of us all chipping away, asking similar questions and going, wait a minute, this is not right.
Yeah.
And
If enough consumers ask,
it was easy for them when, early in this, when it was just me, it was easy for them to go away, you're bothering me. But now there's more and more and more. And so all of us together, the foundation is crumbling.
and we've gotten a couple of lawyers on our side, and we've gotten more pet parents who sadly have lost their pets due to pet food, like the pentobarbital problem, and they're starting to attend. And for a pet owner to pay out the money to not only get into the meeting, but get to the meeting and stay wherever city the meeting is in for whatever period of time, it's a huge investment. So I'm going to put a plug for Susan. I'm going to put a plug for Cole as well. If you have not seen Pet Food, go after this, find Pet Food, watch it. If you haven't seen it and you don't know everything about the inside of the pet food industry, you are going to be blown away, and you will change how you feed your pets if you haven't already. And for those of you, because I can't see the Facebook page right now, but I guarantee there's a lot of people going, what is the best food to feed my pet? What should I feed my pet? Because we get that question in every feed. Susan Fixton produces the list. The list is very difficult for a pet food company to get on. They have to be 100% transparent in their sourcing, their production, what's in their food, that they've done testing on their food. So she produces the list every year. It is very difficult to get on that list, but you can be assured that if there's a pet food company on that list, that they have been transparent with their ingredients, their sourcing, their processing, because Susan vets them. It's kind of a full-time job. And I get the list every year. I totally appreciate the list, and the money that you donate to get the list is what allows Susan to get to the meetings and continue to do the work that she's doing. And if we all download the Pet Food meeting, maybe that gets a couple bucks back into Cole's pocket. I don't really know. I don't know how all that movie stuff works, but we've got to keep him doing what he's doing, because he's doing incredible research for us. Hey, honey, I see you're sitting over there. You want to cue up some music? And guys, the bad news is when I hit end meeting, the meeting is just going to disappear. So I'm going to thank you so much for your
Judy.
time. You guys are amazing. The work that you do is amazing. Cole, there was at the last AFCO meeting that you were at, and we did a whole bunch of filming at dinner, and there were a lot of drinks involved. I'm a little worried where that filming is going to show up.
I want you to do a film going across the country. Let's, in your motorhome, meeting people. That'd be a good one.
As soon as COVID doesn't scare the poop out of me. Bo only leaves our driveway to go to my daughter's house. All right, you guys have a wonderful day. Everybody that's been watching, we'll see you at 4:00. We're going to talk about CBD as part of the holistic approach. And tonight we have Jousting with Raw and Degenerative Diseases with Ian Billinghurst, our vet friend from Australia. He's awesome. Yeah, we got a great lineup. Thank you so much, guys. You are wonderful. Fun as usual.
Bye.
Bye-bye.